Hey class, how you doing? Welcome to our very empty classroom right now. Sure miss seeing you guys here in person. Want to get a video lesson on some of the things that we're doing in Unit 6 in math right now. Happy Earth Day. Sure wish you guys were here in person. And if you check out the classroom, it's super quiet. I came in today to use the internet and the whiteboard here because I figured I could get some of the ideas that we've seen in the unit so far across easier this way. And then also, I don't want to just do a recap of what's in the book. You can see what's in the book. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen, some of the vocabulary is what I want to focus on today. So if you look at Unit 6, one of the things that Unit 6, our textbook, is really big into are the tape diagrams, representing equations with what they imagine little pieces of tape that you can stretch out and cut up into little pieces. In class, we did a little bit of that. We had some papers that we cut out. For example, it says in one of the questions, represent 4x using a tape diagram. And it has what they imagine as a piece of paper tape drawn out. And you have an X at each of the little boxes here, and each of the little rectangles. And hey, you have 4 X's. In other words, on top, it will put something like this in your textbook, and it will show a little 4x at the top. Same thing with 7x equals 21. I've already drawn in the little 7s here. And we'll ask the students to, could you please represent what does 21 look like in terms of a picture? If each variable right here represents an x, the entire 21 would go over it. It's asking students to think about, okay, how many 7s fit into 21? One of the things I wanted to make sure that we review for really understanding and getting ready for the algebra in 7th and 8th grade is the 1-step and the 2-step equations. We talked a little bit about algebra. It's really just shorthand arithmetic. You already know all the concepts in algebra, so I have flip sides over here. And when we had our toolbox example, or tool belt example, I tried to have you imagine you walk in with a job, you're a carpenter, and you've only got 4 tools. There are 4 tools. The only 4 tools you really need in algebra are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And so when you look at a 1-step equation, I'll put an example of a 1-step equation up here. We'll go ahead and solve the first 1-step equation. The 2-step, we're not going to get there yet. But the 1-step equation, well, let's use this as an example. 7x equals 21, perfect example. You're looking at a 1-step equation. They call it a 1-step equation. You're saying, okay, for my algebra toolbox, which is over here, which one of those tools do I need to undo the multiplication that I see going on here? In other words, I'm looking for the operation that's the opposite of multiplication with the ultimate goal of getting the x, the variable, and I'll go through the vocab in just a second, the x of the variable by itself on one side of that equal sign. One of the ways that I was encouraging you to look at it, to write it, is, okay, well, let's do the division on one side, divided by 7. In other words, we're isolating the variable, we're getting the variable by itself. And the golden rule of equations, that came from another video, another lesson, but the most important rule of any equation is whatever you do on one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other. If you don't do it to both sides of the equal sign, it's not an equation anymore, and I'm emphasizing the equal part, it's an inequality. And that's a lesson for another day. Inequalities are something that we've touched on already, but that's a different lesson. If I divide one side of the equation by 7, I have to do the same thing to the other side. I know every single student watching this says, hey, I could figure out what that x is without doing that whole step. I know that that x is going to be 3. It's the only number that makes this a true statement. That's true. You're right. But the thing is, especially with algebra, at first it's about the method. How do we attack it? How do we get a method that's going to work as equations get more and more complicated? So in this case right here, the 7s cancel, 21 divided by 7, hey, 3, we all know that. X equals 3, put it in a little box, great. The 2-step equation I'm going to put on the board here in just a second. I'm not going to solve it. I'm putting up the 2-step equation more to talk a little bit about the terms or the things that we have to get straight in terms of vocabulary in Unit 6. So, I'll put out in a red pen, hopefully it'll show up on your screen there. But this one, by the way, comes right out of the book. 5x plus 7 equals 17. You might remember, can't remember exactly what page it's on, but 5x plus 7 equals 17. Just a couple things we want to make sure that we get down in terms of the vocabulary. The first is, this entire thing is called an equation. Why? Well, it's a math sentence with an equal sign. Pretty straightforward there. I have an equation. And the reason I'm spending a little bit of time talking about the vocabulary is a lot of times, 7th grade, 8th grade, when you move on to high school and beyond, the teachers, other students, your textbook will throw around all these terms just assuming that you know what they're talking about. We just want to make sure. You've got this part, which is not a constant because that 5, it's stuck to the x. So we call that a coefficient. It's our number that's stuck to the variable that we're eventually going to solve for. So this is called a coefficient. The variable, the number represented by a letter usually. In algebra, they traditionally use x. They don't always. You can use any letter you want, A, B, L. But in this case, in most of your algebra books, you'll see x used to represent variables. The variable is the x. And you'll look at the 7 and the 17 over here. Again, this is a 2-step equation. We're going to have to go to our toolbox here and use addition or subtraction, then use multiplication or division, or the other way around. We have to use both of those. We're not going to solve this one, just going for the terms, but I just want to remind us there. If you look at this right here, you've got a 7 and a 17 sitting by itself. Those are constants. And the last thing we want to make sure, so constants, the last thing that we want to check out, take a second looking at this right here, circle all the terms. And try it for yourself for just a moment. I'd like you to write this down on a free page in your Unit 6 book like we normally do if we were in class together. If you've done a circling of the terms, it should look something like this. So again, I have to go down a little bit lower here to get to the board, but one of the terms would be 5x. Another term would be the 7. Another term, the last term here would be the 17. Terms in algebra are separated by addition, by subtraction, and of course, by the equal sign. Couple things I wanted to go over in class. 1-step equations, coefficients, variables, terms, equations, and a little bit about the tape diagrams, but really the tape diagrams are just a visual way for Unit 6 to kind of show you to represent equations. Our goal by the end of Unit 6 here is to go through 1-step equations, going through our algebra toolbox, saying, hey, which one of these 4 do I use to get that variable by itself? Looking forward to seeing you guys in person as soon as possible. Hope this was helpful. I'll post this up to YouTube, and then look for the notes that go along with this. We'll get a Zoom meeting together where you can ask questions, or of course, email me your questions, and I'll get right back to you as soon as possible. Usually I get back to you within an hour or so if you get it to me in the morning, or within 24 hours if you get it to me in the afternoon. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.